Imagine you were asked to help some of the problems related to the situation behind me, a supermarket checkout situation. There are lots of problems you can start brainstorming on. For example, there's some issues related to the lines. How do you find the quickest queue or line to stand in? How do you make them move faster? How do you make people take their groceries and products quicker onto the belt so the line can move smooth forward? And how do you make the scanning process quicker? And how do you make the payment and the packing and the people leaving the supermarket more smooth and in a better and more nice experience than it sometimes happens during rush hour? Some of your first ideas may be related to something you've seen before. Maybe one of the ideas is that you can open up a new line quicker. Maybe some kind of warning system when the lines get too long, that there will be an alarm for the employees to open up a new line. That will give a better experience because they can quickly move to the new line and the other lines will become shorter. Or maybe you get some ideas about handing out some sweet chocolate to the people waiting in the line, or opening up more of those self-service stations so the customers can scan and do the payment themselves, maybe even in a much smaller amount of space than what is required for these long belts here. You may even get a few more ideas, and maybe suddenly you'll get the one great idea, the one idea that seems viable and seems to be able to solve the situation, the problems related to the situations quite fast and with a low amount of investment. Most of us have a relatively low level of creative perseverance. That means that once we got this great idea, this viable, feasible solution that can solve the problems, or at least seems to be able to solve the problem with a relatively low level of investment, then we stop our creative effort. We feel that it's good because we evaluate it up against these other ideas, the previous ideas that we got, that were not so great. But we may have to be careful about settling for the idea that seems great, for the one idea that's different from the others, distinct, better than the others. And that's because there is a relation between the quantity and the quality. So the quantity of your ideas, or good ideas, and the quality of your decisions. For most things in life, we don't have this strange relationship between quality and quantity. But there are a few places where it's very strong. Imagine knowledge and experience. So the more knowledge and experience we have about a particular area, the better decisions we can make related to this area. The same is the case for creativity. We know that the more ideas, or at least more good ideas you get, the better is your foundation for decision making. Because your foundation is based on those ideas. You are able to make the decisions only based on what kind of ideas you have to choose between. So if you have one good idea and a lot of average and bad ideas, then of course it's easy to make a decision because there's only really one option. But imagine you are more perseverant. And after you got this great idea, you keep going. Your attitude is, maybe the next one is even better, or the next one, or the next one. Eventually, because you are daring to invest more time into your creative efforts, you end up with more great ideas. That makes it possible to evaluate great ideas up against other great ideas. And you start to be able to see the nuances between those ideas, what kind of effects they will have compared to each other, what kind of side effects, consequences, positive and negative consequences. So if your problem is important, or if you're very ambitious about getting a new solution or innovative solution for your problem, then you have to be more perseverant. Don't settle when you got a viable, feasible solution. Try to see, can you get a better, or even better idea before you stop comparing, evaluating, and starting to make your decisions. But here comes another problem. Most people find it difficult to go beyond the first 5, 10, or 15 ideas, to go beyond the first initial ideas that seems to somehow become dominant in our thinking throughout, let's say, a brainstorming session or a creative workshop. And there's a reason for that, and that's called pattern thinking. Our thinking is heavily influenced by everything around us, by the stimuli we surround us with, by the billboards we see on our way to work, by the conversations we have in the morning, by the television or movies or series we watch in the evening, or the cinema we go to, the sports we do. Everything that happens to us is affecting how we think and what kind of ideas we can produce from this thinking. So imagine a normal brainstorming session or creative workshop or a decision-making meeting where we're trying to get some ideas before we make up our mind. Then the first ideas that are shared in your team or your group will be the ones that most strongly affect your way of thinking. And it's interesting how these first ideas seem to be ideas that you often have heard before, seen before, tried out before, and somewhere before. So it's rarely the novel, crazy, wild ideas, the original ideas that pops up in the beginning of such a meeting. So what you are actually often affected by are the standard ideas that you're not really necessarily looking for when we talk about creative sessions. And they become dominant in your way of thinking. You produce a lot of variants of these during the meeting, but very often you cannot really get beyond these first couple of ideas. So let's get back to the supermarket checkout situation. Now, we want to go beyond these obvious first ideas that tend to create these strong patterns of our thinking. Maybe we have to accept them, like from top of the head they come, but then we can put on structure afterwards. This structure can have many different forms. But one of the most fundamental approaches for breaking through the patterns and getting into new directions of thinking is to create new combinations, new idea combinations, new knowledge combinations, and new combinations of experience, eventually turning them into new ideas. We can do this systematically by looking specifically for inspiration in other professions and other organizations or other objects where they have similar problems. But because they have a different history, a different logic have occurred, and thus they have probably different kind of solutions. So we can take this as inspiration to rethink our solutions for our problems. Let's take a completely random organization for inspiration, like an airport. Of course, we may instantly start thinking about the tax-free shop, but that may be too similar to the supermarket to really have some different kind of ideas for their problems or similar problems. So let's skip that one. Let's look for other situations in an airport where they maybe have to wait in line, scan some objects, or make people move through this line more smoothly. For example, at the gate or in the security check. So for example, when you have to put your stuff onto the belt, in most airports, you do it by putting it into some plastic boxes. So you take a plastic box and then you put your jacket, your phone, your computer and stuff into this plastic box, and it pushes forward or it rolls automatically forward. Could we use this plastic box somehow in the supermarket checkout situation? Of course, we can imagine if you do a direct transfer, how the plastic boxes would be lying there near the belt, and you put your groceries and products into this plastic box and put it onto the belt. But maybe this plastic box could come into place even earlier. Maybe it could be placed onto the shopping cart. So while you're doing the shopping, you put your groceries and products into these plastic boxes. Maybe they are hung 2 or 3 onto the supermarket shopping cart. So once you get to the checkout, you unhook each of the plastic boxes, maybe the 2 or the 3, and put each of them onto the belt, and voila, you're finished with this procedure. So it maybe goes from having, if you have 20 products, you maybe have to do the movement 10 or 20 times, depending on how many things you can have in your hands. And now you only have to do it 2 or 3 times, making the process more speedy. Let's go back to the structure. It's possible to put up 4 steps to go through to help you get into new directions of thinking on your problems. Step 1, identify key problems related to your focus area. And don't be afraid to use your own intuition, your own insight and experience about the focus area to define these problems you think are most important. 2, now select an unrelated object, profession, organization that you want to use for inspiration to solve your problem. Of course, this can be done by random, or it can be done by looking specifically for objects, profession, organizations who have similar problems. 3, now you search for similar problems and try to identify the solutions they have come up with to solve these similar problems. Of course, it has to be similar to the ones you have in your situation, the supermarket checkout or whatever your problem is. And 4, now you transfer this identified solution, the solution from this unrelated object, profession, organization, in this case, the airport, into your real focus area to solve the problem you're focused on in the supermarket checkout situation or whatever your problem is.